everybody. Welcome into Go With The Flow, presented by R.S. Andrews. My name is Brandon Adams. Happy to have Dari Payro from R.S. Andrews back with us for another week. Happy to have all of you with us as well. If you've never joined us before, here is how it works on our program. In just a couple of moments, we'll hear from an entire cross-section of Dog Nation opinions. Mike Griffith, Jeff Sintel, Connor Riley, the Dog Nation Daily listeners and viewers will have a chance to weigh in on the big games of the weekend. And thankfully, for the first time really in a while, we've got a nice crop of games to look at. Full slate in the SEC, minus just one scheduled game that won't take place, and a handful of top 25 matchups from both the Big Ten and the Big 12. So we've got some football to talk about here today, and glad to be doing it with Dari Payro from R.S. Andrews. Dari, welcome in. I know you had a very interesting weekend a week ago, and I'm sure you're looking ahead to some great picks here for this upcoming weekend as well.
Oh, yeah. Fired up. Lots of games. We get Georgia on the night game, maybe little black jerseys. So really looking forward to it.
By the way, I am wearing my black today as a way of in solidarity with the idea that Georgia could wear its black jerseys. No dog collar, around my neck, the way that the Georgia black jerseys have. But nonetheless, I'm trying to be in solidarity with that. Now, you were not wearing a black jersey last week, but what a moment it was for you. I want to show you this on our screen. We did not want to give away this surprise last week, but now that it's happened, the truth can be told. So with College Game Day from ESPN last week at Augusta National, and just given the weirdness of 2020, not a lot of on-site activity for this, the Home Depot, the grill activity that you typically see on an ESPN College Game Day, that was actually at Dari's house last week. Dari lives a charmed life, lots of golf in Dari's weekly schedule. The College Game Day bus at Dari's house last week, you can see that on your screen. Dari, what was that like to have that experience? Certainly looked like some good food. It looked like a pretty good time as well.
It was amazing, amazing time for my family. We had a blast. Home Depot, the backyard tailgate put on just a first class event for game day. We were able to hang out on the game day bus. Lots of fun. The food was amazing. Fox Brothers, had their chef there and brought in all the food. They put on the grill. The actual Fox Brothers were there. The owners were there.
Oh, is that right?
So mad props to them. All the food they did was amazing. We had the full Monty from, every kind of pork, rib, brisket. We had it all. Chicken wings, cookies. You name it, it was all delicious. So
yeah,
amazing event. There's two locations that they did, Augusta and my backyard. And man, it was an amazing experience.
Were the conditions in your backyard as favorable as they were at Augusta National all weekend?
No, probably not. No, probably not. Backyard was, lots of leaves and everything else out. We couldn't get it manicured as nice as Augusta.
Yeah, we can all relate to that. Speaking of nice, was not necessarily a nice weekend for all of our competitors in our season-long contest as we make picks against the spread here each and every week. Let me show you the standings, how they are now, and after what happened a week ago where there are only 3 games to pick and lots of 1s and 2s across the board there. Dog Nation Daily listeners and viewers did go 0-3, but Mike Griffith remains on top at 34-23 for the season. Just behind him is Jeff Sintel at 32-25. As I said, both Mike and Jeff go 1-2 on the week. Dari is up there at 31-26 on the year after a 1-2 week with college football picks, but you do see the asterisk next to that because while Dari may have only been 1-2 with his college picks, we're going to give Dari a little bit of credit here because he made a strong play on Dustin Johnson for the Masters last week. DJ goes on to win. And he also talked about the notion of Cameron Champ finishing in the top 20. We did some Masters talk at the end of last week's broadcast because of the relative small number of football games that were available to pick. And Champ did finish T19 in the top 20, as Dari suggested he would. So, Dari, good job there on both those Masters picks last weekend. And kind of we all kind of threw out sort of a number of picks that we kind of like, and 2 of yours really hit home pretty well there.
Yeah, I did pretty good on some of my straight up bets that I did, for the Masters. Did really well in some of the pools that I was in. Just missed some cashing in some pretty large pools that had like 300-400 entries. I was I was just a few spots outside there, but definitely I was pretty happy with picking some of the scores this past weekend.
Well, not picking scores well was Connor Riley, just a 1-2 for a week ago. That puts him 27-30 on the year, but he is ahead of me right now. I am bringing up the rear at the moment, 25-32 on the year, but it was a 2-1 week for me a week ago. So I'm looking forward to building on that here this week. Before we make the picks for this week's games, let me also remind you that Go With the Flow is presented by RS Andrews. In much the same way we like to keep the flow going with picks here on the show. If you want that flow going in your house, whether it be the heat coming out of your heating system or the hot water going into your shower from your water heater, RS Andrews can be the one to trust for that. I did finally turn on the heat in my house last night. It was cold enough to do that. I flipped the switch. Everything worked the way it was supposed to. But if you're nervous that your furnace might not be ready to do that, or if you have a feeling that it might be on its last legs, go ahead and get the peace of mind you deserve. Get your system tuned back up to factory fresh specs. Check out my friends at RS Andrews. They'll take care of you on that. They'll show up on time. They'll do the work that's promised for the price that's promised. It's one of the reasons why we love to recommend RS Andrews. You can find them online at rsandrews.com. All right, first up for us today is Georgia hosting the SEC's other Bulldogs, Mississippi State. The Maroon Bulldogs have an awful season, and they've also dealt with the coronavirus. Their game last Saturday against Auburn not able to take place. Georgia's game against Missouri was also postponed as well, but not because of coronavirus issues for UGA. Dogs chomping at the bit to get back to football after the last game against Florida was an ugly loss. Maybe a little bit of motivation to have a better performance here. Possibility you see JT Daniels. Possibility that Georgia dons itself, as we said before, in black jerseys. As we said before, the Dogs are 25-point favorites. Here's how it works. You'll hear from Mike Griffith. You'll hear from Jeff Sentell. You'll hear from Connor Riley. Dog Nation daily listeners and viewers will weigh in with their consensus. I'll share my thoughts. And then Dari decides if he wants to go with the flow and join us in the pick, or if he has his own idea about who's going to win the game. We encourage you to play right along with us as we go through each of the picks for this week's top games from a point spread perspective. With that in mind, the Dogs, favored by 25, returning to Sanford Stadium for the first time in a while. Mike Griffith, tell us your thoughts.
Yeah, I like Georgia to win this game, BA. I think Georgia's offense is going to look good with JT Daniels and George Pickens in the mix. I'm going to take Georgia 38, Mississippi State.
So Mike is on UGA right there. Jeff Sentell, what do you think?
Man, you're banking on a lot of things to have Georgia defense hold Mississippi State down, Georgia's offense to rise up and get a 25-point lead on Mississippi State. Sounds like Missouri, feels like Missouri. First three letters are the same. I think Georgia will cover this line today. Let's get radical. I'm going to think Georgia's going to get this one by about 28 points, 29 points. Georgia will cover this spread of 20.
So, Jeff, also on UGA, clean sweep for our scribes thus far. Connor Riley, how about you?
Like Georgia here. Mississippi State's real bad offensively this year, and I think Georgia does just enough to get to that 25 number. So I don't feel great about it, but give me the Bulldogs here.
Connor on UGA, Dog Nation daily audience also agrees by the tune of 83%. They take Georgia here in this game. So a lot of love for the Georgia Bulldogs thus far. And Dari, it may surprise you to hear this, but I actually can't really join in on that to the tune of Georgia winning this game by such a large spread. You know, to cover a 25-point number, it stands to reason Georgia has to score, at least 28 points, right? You could conceivably win the game, 25-0, but the odds are you got to try to find a way to get those 4 touchdowns, get that done. And that's just not something that Georgia has done with regularity here this season. They've only scored 28 or more 3 times thus far this year against an SEC-only schedule. And last season, Dari, in 9 games against SEC opponents, Georgia only had 28 or more 1 time in those games last season against SEC opponents. This is just not a team that handles these big numbers particularly well right now. I'd love nothing more than to be wrong. But for now, I'm not quite so sure that I am. I think that Georgia wins. They probably win easily. I don't think Mississippi State's very good. But I don't think that Georgia's flashy enough, fun enough right now to cover such a large number, even at home, with maybe reason to want to play better. So I'm going to take Mississippi State plus the 25, but the flow is decidedly on the side of UGA. You want to go with the flow and take the red and black Bulldogs.
Well, before we do anything, we gotta pop some ice cold, tasty beverage and celebrate. I think this is first winning week here that we have 2-1.
Yeah, for
last
me,
week?
yeah.
For you.
That's
We got to
definitely worth
celebrate
drinking.
that. We got to
Yeah,
celebrate that.
That's definitely worth drinking too.
Yeah, and normally I would feel jinxed by you kind of going against everyone else because that's kind of my pick as well here.
That's right.
Normally I'd feel like you jinxed me, but since you're coming off a winning week, I feel okay about it.
I'm not as bad of company as I otherwise would have been.
Yeah, I feel a little okay, not as queasy as I normally would have been.
We should be also point out this is your first time going back to adult beverage on this show after kind of sticking with water the last couple of weeks. So maybe you're trying to get some what do they call it, like a liquid ball straightener or something like that. Maybe this is also your pick straightener here a little bit this week with the going back to the more traditional adult beverage after kind of keep up with the clear stuff a little bit the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we got a big slate of games on here. It's always a good pairing with a lot of college football.
So you are taking Mississippi State plus 25.
I am going to do that. I think the week off from the Florida loss really helps Georgia here. I was really concerned about that Missouri game right afterwards, but that they didn't play that. But 25 points is a lot to cover for an offense that's struggling to find its identity and continuity. Mississippi State's just really bad. They're averaging 21 yards on the ground, which ranks 126 in college football. That bodes well for Georgia's defense to really just kind of lock this game down. But, if DeJuan Mathis starts this game, there's zero chance that Georgia even comes close to covering this. Mississippi State's not that good, and they're also starting the most first-time starters in all of FBS right now. I think they got like 19 or 20 first-time kids that are starting, a lot of underclassmen starting. I just need to see, like I said, last time, I'm like Missouri, I'm the show me state. I need to see this offense kind of click to cover that many points. So it's really not a bet, on Mississippi State, much as it's a bet against Georgia's offense. So I'm taking the points here.
I think that's well said all the way around. Next game to pick in the SEC, Florida, the team we were just discussing, inside track now on winning the SEC East, gets a chance to travel to Nashville to take on Vanderbilt. Commodores have covered in 2 straight games, but both those games coming away from home. They have not been good at home as of late. Last game in Nashville was a blowout loss to Ole Miss, which the Rebels easily covered the spread there. The number is gigantic, though. 31.5 points Florida's favored by on the road here. With that in mind, Mike Griffith, tell us your thoughts on the Gators in Nashville to take on the Commodores.
Yeah, it seems like it was just yesterday that Vanderbilt was playing Texas A&M closer than anybody expected. I think they'll slow Florida down a little bit. I still think Florida wins, but I'm going to take the points in the Commodores. Let's make it Florida 37 and Vanderbilt 10.
So Mike takes Vanderbilt there, liking the idea of the underdog, keeping it a little closer than the experts might think. Jeff Sintel, how about you?
Florida's going to play pinball with Vanderbilt this week. I think this line could be 40, and I'd still be down with it. I think Florida will cover the 31.5 handily.
So Jeff on the side of the Florida Gators here, and now Connor Riley, it's your turn.
I've been wrong about Vanderbilt almost every week of the season this year, so I'm going to take Florida here. I think they're going to want to score a lot of points, run it up, look pretty, convince people that even if they potentially lose a second game, but they're still one of the 4 best teams in the country this year.
So Connor's on Florida as well. Dog Nation daily listeners and viewers, they still don't like the Gators very much, but the last couple of weeks have maybe won them over a little bit. The audience sides with Vanderbilt, but only slightly, to the tune of 55% on the Commodores here. Dari, for me, Florida is the pick here. As I said before, Vanderbilt's not been terrible against the spread the last couple of weeks, but as I've also said in the past, I think there's a little bit of an opportunity for Vanderbilt on the road because you get the even bigger point spreads there. There's a tendency to want to give them a little bit of a break for the games in Nashville, but that's where Vanderbilt's really been the worst because, this is a team that doesn't have much to play for and doesn't really stand up at home in the way that you would think an SEC team typically might. The other thing here is Florida has been good against the spread. They're 4-2 thus far against the spread this year. The only times they haven't covered, the loss to Texas A&M and on the road, that's not necessarily anything to apologize for right now. South Carolina held them just under the number earlier in the season. That was still an easy win. And then if you look over the course of the last 15 games for Florida coach Dan Mullen, Gators 11-4-1 against the spread in those games. So for the most part, Florida playing as a favorite with a pretty sizable point spread has not had very many hiccups as of late. That's really been one of the examples that Mullen has kind of righted the ship there. The fact they're handling easier competition pretty efficiently. This is a gigantic number, and on the road, it would almost be a fool's errand any time out. I just simply don't believe Vanderbilt has any desire to show up at home. And I think that Florida likes going out there, being flashy offensively, scoring a bunch of points. I'm going to take Florida minus 31.5 points on the road. And that puts the flow on the side of Florida as well. You want to go with the flow and take the Gators.
Yeah, I am. I mean, I think Florida's going to hang 50-plus points, maybe even 60 points on this game. I mean, it's a ton of points to cover on the road. Huge number. It seems like it could be a letdown game for Florida going on the road like this. But I think they're trying to rack up stats and style points, right? I mean, you got Trask in the Heisman contention. I think Mullen knows that, and I think he's going to try to capitalize on this for recruiting. Trask threw 6 touchdowns last week. I think he's going to throw 7 touchdowns this week. And I think that's the mentality that offense has. And I don't see him slowing down anytime soon.
Next game in the SEC is an interesting one from a point spread standpoint because it's Arkansas hosting LSU. Now, this game opened with Arkansas as a 2.5-point home favorite. There has been a dramatic shift in the line since then. Depending on where you're shopping on the Friday afternoon that you see this, you may see LSU as much as a 2.5 or field goal favorite in this game. We're going to operate on the assumption that Arkansas is a 1-point favorite because at time of recording, that's kind of where the number was. So this is an example of how lines can move over the course of a week, and a pretty dramatic shift, almost a full touchdown move on both sides of the favorite line here for Arkansas and LSU. So keep that in mind for the game, and also keep in mind for our picks here. We're operating on Arkansas as a 1-point favorite here. Mike Griffith, go ahead and give us your thought on the Hogs hosting the Tigers.
A lot of issues at LSU right now, these sexual misconduct off the field issues. These players probably going to step up and try and control what they can control. Arkansas exposed a little bit. Florida, the defense was lit up. Let's be honest. Who's Arkansas really beat so far? I'm going to take LSU to win this 24-17 in Fayetteville.
So Mike takes LSU right there. Dog Nation's recruiting insider Jeff Sintel. How about you?
This is one of those lines for me I think you'd stay away with even if you had house money, or maybe you had Dustin Johnson's last week around the greens at Augusta. Tricky game. Talent says LSU. Vibe says Arkansas. Sam Pittman should be back. You got to go for me. I think I'm going to pick Arkansas to win this game. I think Arkansas is going to win this game by about 7 to 10 points. So obviously that line will be fine. And I think it kind of comes down to leadership and having Sam Pittman back on the field.
So does Arkansas for Jeff Sintel. Rivers signing the pick of Mike Griffith. Now, Connor Riley, it's your turn.
Yes, sir. Give me the Razorbacks here. This is a game I think LSU cannot afford to lose with how poor everything else is going on in that program right now. And I think that's exactly what they're going to come out and do. I know everyone, they got blown out by Florida last week, but they still scored and moved the ball in the Gators. I expect them to do that against LSU this week.
It is Arkansas for Connor Riley. Dog Nation daily listeners and viewers agree with him. They've liked Sam Pittman all year long. 63% do take Arkansas to cover what at the time was a 1-point number as a favorite there at home. Dari, this is an easy pick for me to make because I'm a big believer that when a line moves this much, we're not talking about half-point increments here and there. We're talking about wild swings to the point where the books themselves are left really vulnerable to a pretty juicy middle on both sides of the win line here. This is being moved because of big money coming in on LSU. Important to note, even after the early season struggles, most of the Vegas power ratings had LSU still as a top 10 team nationally, even after the loss to Mississippi State. Vegas just kind of likes what LSU brings to the table from a talent perspective. Shaky a quarterback here, but this is an Arkansas team that had meager expectations at the beginning of the season. I don't really need to know more than I believe I do. Big money seems to have poured in on LSU, and who am I to argue against that? I'm going to take LSU here, but the flow is on the side of Arkansas. You want to go with the flow and take the Hogs.
Yeah, I'm going to take Arkansas. here. LSU probably wins this game, but with Miles Brennan out, I'm going to take a flyer in Arkansas to pull out a home victory.
I think the one thing about Arkansas is they've proven. Now, last week's game against Florida wasn't very pretty, but Arkansas still moved the football a little bit, as Connor Riley kind of mentioned. They've got really good coordinators. Briles is a good offensive coordinator. Barry Adams, one of the best defensive coordinators in the country right now. That to the extent that it was a surprising season when they played well early, it's really been firmly established now that Arkansas is going to be well coached in every game, and obviously that's part of the reason why there was some initial love on the Arkansas side, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And you got Pittman that's going to be on the sidelines now, so I think they're going to have a little extra motivation since he wasn't there last week. Franks has been great at quarterback, for him. It's kind of been a good fit for him in Arkansas. So, I think they may have a little extra motivation this week against LSU, who's been, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
Also a wildly different feeling around Fayetteville, just given the fact that the beginning of the season, Arkansas fans didn't have many expectations, and now they probably have an SEC team they're pretty excited about and a coaching staff they feel really good about there. All right, it's Go With The Flow presented by R.S. Andrews. As I said before, make sure you check out R.S. Andrews online at rsandrews.com. Story after story, R.S. Andrews has been delivering smiles, and how that relates to you right now is if you're getting ready to watch some of these football games on TV this weekend, there's no feeling worse than knowing your viewing experience is interrupted because you've got a water heater issue or something along those lines. In many cases, R.S. Andrews can fix those problems for you the same day. You just need to reach out and find them. rsandrews.com will give you all the content information you need, and you can find out more about the stories of how R.S. Andrews has been coming to the rescue for a lot of folks in need when it comes to air conditioning, heating, and plumbing and electric issues. Find them online at rsandrews.com. Next game, the Alabama Crimson Tide, once again, is more than a 30-point favorite, this time 30.5, hosting the Kentucky Wildcats. Kentucky did win last Saturday against Vanderbilt, did not cover. Commodore slipped in the back door before that was all said and done. This is a little bit of a Bear Bryant Bowl with Bryant, the former coach of both the Alabama Crimson Tide and the Wildcats. As said before, at Bryant Denny on Saturday, Crimson Tide 30.5-point favorites. Mike Griffith, you go first.
Yeah, I think Kentucky's defense is sneaky good, and the fact that they can take the run game away, Alabama's still dynamic. But I'm going to take Kentucky to cover here. I'm going to take the 30.5 points, and I'm going to take Kentucky in the 30.5. I'm going to make it Alabama 31, Kentucky 7.
So it is Kentucky for Mike Griffith. Mike's had no problem taking underdogs thus far this year, and he tries another one there against the Alabama Crimson Tide. Not to win, of course, but just to cover the spread. Jeff Sintel, how about your thoughts on Big Blue and Bama?
I think the sub game for me is who's going to win by more this week, Florida or Alabama? And what was this? Think long, think wrong. I think Mike Griffith quoted this on this very program earlier this season. Man, I just think if Vanderbilt can score 35 on Kentucky and even 21 where it's really competitive, I think Alabama can score 55 or 60. I look for Alabama to cover this line handily.
It is Alabama there for Jeff Sintel. And Connor Riley, how about for you?
I hate that I'm going to pick multiple 30-point favorites this week because it just feels gross and wrong. But give me Alabama here in a matchup of schools that both employed Bear Bryant.
Connor also on Alabama, and 78% of our Dog Nation daily audience, listeners and viewers, they agree with this too. They'll take the Crimson Tide here. And Dari, this is another one for me that needs to be a simple pick. I've said before that Bama's record when favored by more than 30 is not as good as some people might think it is. Bama has a tendency to kind of dominate that somewhere in that 2 to 3 touchdown range. Those are the games they seem to win by 40. Sometimes the big numbers are a little harder to cover, and maybe against a Kentucky team that plays decent defense and can run the ball, maybe a huge number to cover, not an easy thing to do. But by my count, I've been wrong on Bama this year 4 times when I said they wouldn't cover the spread, and they did. And that's just not a recipe for winning a contest like this. So I'm going to take a play out of your playbook. For a while, you were famous for always taking Alabama no matter what. I have gone against Bama too much this season, trying to be too cute and ultimately paying a big price for that. So I'm not going to be too cute here. As I said before, there's a couple of aspects of Kentucky that make them a team that's tough to beat by more than 30 points. But if I'm going to be wrong, I want to be wrong on the side of Alabama for a change. So give me the Crimson Tide here. that puts the flow on the side of Alabama. You want to go with the flow and take Alabama.
Absolutely. Rolling with Bama here. Big number, but I mean, they're just too much for Kentucky. I'm really more confident in the first half line again this week on Bama, which is 17.5. Way more comfortable with that than the overall, but I'm not betting against Bama right now.
I think that's a great point. I think Alabama in the first half situation here feels really good, and just a matter of in kind of a grinded out game after that. Because listen, Stoops is a good enough coach that if he wants to go into Tuscaloosa and play in such a way that he doesn't get embarrassed, knowing he has no chance to win, I don't think in really any scenario could Kentucky ever win straight up here. You know, if you're a Bama better, you do worry about Stoops coaching in such a way not to get embarrassed, which is another reason why you're maybe somewhat more protected by a much smaller first half line, an explosive Alabama offense. That's really not potentially a problem. I think that's another very interesting edge. This will be the second time that you've called on a first half line. The last time you dialed that up for Alabama, it also cashed.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the play on this game. If you're gonna pick it, I would probably stay away from that on my overall card with that big number, but definitely game for that first half line.
All right, we stay in the Yellowhammer State, but we move over to the loveliest village on the plains, at least as they like to say it, with Auburn hosting Tennessee. We all know the story here of the Vols. They are a mess. Coaches allegedly fired during games. Quarterback controversy. Jeremy Pruitt, facing a lot of heat from his fans after Tennessee has turned out not to be very good, when at one point in time, Vols fans thought they might be a little bit better. They go up against an Auburn team that has maybe kind of found its legs again after some uglier performances early in the season. Folks remember, Auburn getting a win against LSU and maybe kind of establishing itself a bit more. Last week's game against Mississippi State was not able to take place. This is the Tigers' first game now. I think 21 days. It'll be a long layout for them playing football. So we'll see if there's any rustiness in play there. For the most part, rustiness has not been an issue for college football teams that have missed time. But Auburn does host Tennessee as a 10-point favorite. Mike Griffith, with that in mind, you may go ahead and start us off.
Yeah, I like Auburn to win this game. Tennessee's got some internal issues. I'm going to take Auburn 38, Tennessee 17. I'm going to take Aubie in the cover. They're going to come.
So it is Auburn for Mike. Jeff Sintel, what about you?
I like Auburn to cover. I think, the Tigers have had about 21 days off since their last game. I think they'll be feeling fresh. They got run game. They got quarterback. I mean, those are kind of two things that you don't really know about Tennessee anymore, and I'd like Auburn. Auburn especially is going to host, so I like everything about this game. Give me Auburn to cover.
It is all Auburn all the time here, and Connor Riley, I'm imagining you agree, but let's let you have the floor so you can tell us yourself.
I think this Tennessee team is begging to quit, and I think Auburn's going to give them a couple of reasons too. They've righted the ship there after some early season struggles, and I think Auburn wins comfortably this weekend against the Volunteers.
So Connor is on Auburn. Dog Nation daily audience is 61%. Do take the Tigers here to cover the 10-point number. There's very little respect for Tennessee left anywhere. But for Dari, the story on this game is actually on the other side. And we've cited this already this year, and it's been a valuable stat to know. Auburn has been good at home against the spread. They've covered 9 of their last 11 in those kinds of instances. Now, this version of Jordan-Hare Stadium is not a full crowd. It's not the raucous environment we've seen in the past there, but Auburn playing well at home has been a multi-year theme. This is not a huge number against Tennessee team right now that, as said before, I think is probably pretty dreadful, and I don't think Auburn is. Auburn was a team that I had solidly in my top 15, top 20 at the start of the season. I think they'll still be there at the end of the season. These are the kinds of games those types of teams win with ease. I have no argument for Tennessee whatsoever. I feel like Auburn wins this game by at least a couple of touchdowns, and that is a clean sweep on Auburn with no argument for Tennessee whatsoever. You want to go with the flow and join everybody in taking Auburn here in this game.
Break out the broom. Yeah, clean sweep. I really, really like Auburn here at home. This is probably my favorite game on the slate this week. Tennessee's a mess. Their offense is struggling. Auburn's offense is coming off back-to-back impressive outings. I think that week off helps Malzahn more than it does Pruitt. I think he's a better game planner. Really like Auburn at home here.
All right, so that's fun to think about. Moving on now. A lame duck game for South Carolina. They host Missouri. Of course, Will Muschamp was fired here this week. They've also had significant opt-outs, I should say, with Israel Mukwamu, the defensive back, and before that, J.C. Horn, arguably the Gamecocks' best player, certainly one of their best players, deciding he wants to sit out the rest of the season. For Missouri, a chance to return back to football after coronavirus cases prevented them from playing the Georgia Bulldogs in Columbia, Missouri last week. South Carolina is an underdog here at home, but just 5.5 points, despite the fact they are, as I said before, in seemingly kind of a lame duck situation here. I think this is a very interesting game from a gambling standpoint. I'm curious to find out what everyone has to say about that. So, including Dari Payroll here in just a minute. So to get the ball rolling on this one, let's hear from Mike Griffith. Mike, take it away.
Yeah, I saw J.C. Horn quit. You start quitting on your teammates. That's the sign of a fractured locker room. Rumors more South Carolina players could opt out. Everybody jumping ship in Columbia. I'm going to take Missouri to win that game 24-13, cover the 5.5-point spread.
So it is Missouri for Mike Griffith there. Another example of Mike taking a team going on the road here. Connor, I should say Jeff Sintel. How about you?
Well, we just had breaking news right before we went to Showtime here. At least when we were recording this show, South Carolina's now down another cornerback, Israel Mukwamu. All 6 feet 4 inches of him is also opting out for the NFL draft. I like Missouri. I like what they're doing with Ed Drinkwitz. I like the direction that program's going. They're going to have run game. Their passing game with Connor Bazelak is going to look a lot better, throwing the second string Big 12 type corners now here in this game. I like Missouri big in this game. I think they'll cover. And I can call them the Gamecocks this week. I'm going to have to call them the Lame Ducks, like Mike said.
So Missouri for Jeff Sintel, and now Connor Riley. Go ahead.
South Carolina's defense has given up 159 points in the last 3 games, and they just saw their best 2 corners exit the season. And Missouri is not a great offensive team, but I think they're going to be able to do enough. You saw them do it against LSU earlier this year. But you know what? I've picked too many favorites today. Give me the Gamecocks. They're going to rally around interim head coach Mike Bobo, and they're going to find a way to keep this closer than it should.
So Connor Riley makes the case for South Carolina there as an underdog. Dog Nation Daily audience doesn't agree. 87% take Missouri, just given the problems that South Carolina has had. Dari, I do want to have a good week this week. I want to have a winning week to kind of go along with the fact that there's a chance to make up some ground because we are picking up so many games. And when I look at some of the mistakes I made this year, one of the points that I made a little earlier is I feel like at times I'm guilty of trying to get just a little too cute, expecting underdogs to do things they're just maybe not capable of doing. I really, really, really am interested in this game from the South Carolina standpoint. 5.5 is not a huge number. And let me try to make the case for as of why I could really be talking to South Carolina here. Missouri is 3-2 against the spread thus far this season. However, the 3 covers have all come at home, whether it be the game against Kentucky, the game against LSU. There have been moments in which the Tigers have they had a cover of a big number against Alabama in week 1. The best moments from Missouri this season have happened in Columbia under new coach Eli Drinkwitz. What has gone on away from home? The blowout loss to Florida. No one can really, necessarily be too upset with Missouri about that, given how Florida's played. But think back to earlier in the year when this Missouri team traveled to Knoxville and got obliterated in week 2 by Tennessee. As it turns out, that Tennessee performance is not a very excusable game, even for a first-year coach like Drinkwitz there for the Tigers. I guess my question is, are we sure that the rookie SEC coach Drinkwitz is capable of taking his team on the road right now? And while, the Gamecocks have had their opt-outs, it's Mike Bobo as interim coach, this is not a huge pull to cover a 5.5-point number here. That's a kind of a long-winded dissertation for me, but I'm going to take Bobo and the Gamecocks plus the 5.5 against a Missouri team that, who are they to be, touchdown favorites on the road right now, given where the perception was of them to start the year. Maybe I regret doing this, but the Gamecocks are an underdog I can get behind for Saturday. Flow on the side of Missouri, though. You want to go with the flow.
South Carolina's defense has been getting shredded these past 3 games or so. Muschamp, even though he got fired, he's walking away with a cool $13 million in his pocket. So I'm sure he'll be doing just fine. I think South Carolina is going to get their running game going, and they're going to control the clock and the tempo. Not only do I like South Carolina to cover, but I like them to win this game outright. In the money line, I love the Gamecocks in this game.
That's funny. This South Carolina game, I should say this South Carolina offense quietly has gotten better at running the football. Bobo has been an offensive coordinator, despite what the caricature that's been drawn of him is, he's been a guy that's found rushing yards for guys in the past. So this is fun. They've quietly gotten better at running the football, and it's nice to have you on the side of the Gamecocks here, including calling for the outright win. That's a lot of fun. This is from a non-gambling standpoint, nobody really cares. But from a gambling standpoint, I think there could be some money to be made on South Carolina here this week, and I'm glad to have you on that side with me. We'll come back to Georgia, Mississippi State before we're done today. We'll look at the over-under in that game, relatively low number for a game involving a Mike Leach coach team. Before that, though, for the first time in a while, we have top 25 matchups outside the SEC, so let's have some fun with those for a moment. Ohio State, fresh off its cancellation against Maryland last week, we'll get a chance to host the top 10 ranked Indiana Hoosiers on Saturday. Buckeyes still a big favorite, though. 20.5 is the number. Mike Griffith, OSU in Indiana. Give us your thoughts.
I'll take Ohio State. Indiana's a basketball school. 37-14, Buckeyes cover the spread.
So Mike takes Ohio State there. Jeff Sintel, what about you? Buckeyes and Hoosiers.
Man, this feels something to me. Indiana top 10, hardly. This feels something to me like a 41-14 type game. Ohio State covers. A lot of big covers this week from the so-called teams that are really plugged into the championship chase right now.
It is Ohio State for Jeff Sintel. And now, Connor Riley, what say you?
Indiana is a team that has feasted on turnovers and made quite a lot of its living off of them. Unfortunately, Justin Fields does not turn the football over. And because of that, I like Ohio State to win comfortably and cover the 20.5.
Ohio State for Connor also. Dog Nation Daily listeners and viewers, they agree. How about 91% on the Buckeyes here? Daria, I was cute a moment ago with my South Carolina pick. I will not be cute on this one. I don't think Indiana's a bad team, to be honest with you, but I do think that their coming out party nationally, the week one win against Penn State, probably means a little bit less now that we found out that the Nittany Lions thus far are winless. Indiana has more winning days, but until somebody slows down Ohio State, I'm going to assume that no one will. There's a gigantic level of motivation here. A lot of ways, this game decides the Big Ten East. So the idea that somehow Ohio State is going to be slipping or at less than full speed, less than full focus, I just don't really see it. I think this is another blowout win for Ohio State, and I will continue to say that until somebody in the Big Ten proves me wrong. It is Ohio State for me, and it's Ohio State for everybody. Clean sweep on the Buckeyes. We're going to go with the flow on OSU.
Well, this is the best Indiana football team in a long, long time. It would be way more interesting if this game was played at Indiana than, at Ohio State. Indiana leads the Big Ten in creating turnovers. They're also at the top of a lot of different statistical categories within that conference. But the teams that they've beaten have a combined record of 3-13. Not really good, even with the wins, like you said, over Penn State and Michigan. They really haven't been tested. Ohio State and Fields are going to give them all they can handle. I want to take Ohio State to cover, but I have a feeling Penix is going to score late, and it's going to get the Hoosiers a cover 42-23. Ohio State's going to win pretty easily. Indiana is going to cover.
I'll give you credit. You've had no problem being the lone wolf on games this year, and you certainly are there on the side of the Hoosiers. That should be pretty fun to see. Let's stay in the Big Ten. Surprising Northwestern team, undefeated and homestanding against Wisconsin on Saturday. Wisconsin's not played a lot of football. They've had 2 cancellations thus far, but they are 7.5-point favorites on the road. With that in mind, Mike Griffith, it's a league you know well. Tell us your thoughts on the Badgers and the Wildcats.
Yeah, that's a cold stadium near the lake. Wisconsin's built for this kind of football. They'll beat Northwestern 24-13, cover the spread.
It is Wisconsin for Mike Griffith. Jeff Sintel, how about you?
Yeah, I think this might be – it's getting chilly outside around Georgia right now. A lot of covers, pull up the covers type week for me with the spread and all these picks. I like whiskey. I like the Badgers in a big way. I like Graham Mertz a lot as a future great Big Ten quarterback. I look for whiskey and the Badgers to cover. They're going to be deeply involved in the playoff chase coming out of the Big Ten. Give me the Badgers. No matter how big the number, no matter that they're going into Chicago, I like Wisconsin.
Wisconsin for Jeff Sintel. Also, Connor Riley, what about you?
On general principle, if a team is a 7.5 point underdog, I will always take that extra half point. I don't feel great about it, but I'm no Medill graduate. So give me Northwestern in the 7.5 at home there. I think they're going to try and play a tight, close game, and they're going to do just enough to cover there.
So, Connor Riley there on Northwestern, the half point looms big for him. Dog Nation Daily listeners and viewers, they're not going to agree by a 2-1 margin. They take whiskey here in this spot. And, Dari, Wisconsin's covered its last 3 games on the road. That actually, goes back into last season a bit. We haven't seen the Badgers play a ton this season. In the games we have seen them play, you're not really sure what to make of some of those games, including, beating up on Michigan. What does that really mean? I have no idea what to do with this game. 7.5 points is kind of a lot. The Northwestern defense has shown up almost every single week. I guess I'm going to take a flyer on Northwestern here. I really don't know what to do on this. Give me Northwestern plus 7.5. I don't feel great about this, but I'm looking at my own card for the week. I've just taken way too many favorites. I'm going to have to make a case for an underdog somewhere, and Northwestern plays enough defense to make the 7.5 maybe stand up and matter. I hate this pick, but I'll take Northwestern. And that puts the flow, though, on the side of Wisconsin. You want to go with the flow and take the favorite on the road.
This is a sneaky game, Brandon. Northwestern is a dangerous team. Pat Fitzgerald has them balling out right now. Wisconsin knows, again, they're ranked number 1 in a lot of statistical categories this year. They're number 1 in third down defense. They're number 1 in scoring defense. They're number 1 in time of possession. I think that becomes really key in this game. I think that's going to give the Badgers just enough and give them the edge to cover in this game. I like Wisconsin. I think this game is going to be really fun to watch. I think it's going to be really close. What's interesting is this game was supposed to be played at Wrigley Field.
Yeah.
Now been moved to, Northwestern Football Stadium. If you look at the trends, Northwestern has actually been pretty good, about 80% covering against the spread in their last 6 games on a neutral site. At home, they are 2-8-1 in their last 11 games at home against the spread. So I like Wisconsin, but I think it's going to be really close, and it's going to come down to the fourth quarter.
Very interesting game, and Dari makes a strong case for, why the Badgers may be the play here. As I said before, I wish I had more confidence in my pick. I do think it's kind of a fun game to watch because you do have, with Mertz on the one side for Wisconsin, defense on the side, you have a little bit of a contrast in styles here. Pretty interesting stuff all the way around.
Pat Fitzgerald's a great coach. Just so you know, he's been on a short list for the Packers head coaching job. They tried to get him instead of Matt LaFleur. He was their number 1 target. So he's a really, really good coach. He's an up-and-comer. I don't know how long he's going to stay at Northwestern. He's always said that's kind of his destination job. But he is a really, really, really good coach.
You mentioned the game being taken away from Wrigley Field. This is like 2 of those type of games that Wisconsin's recently lost. I believe they also lost a game with Notre Dame that was supposed to be at Lambeau Field. So they had 2 high-profile neutral site type games, both of which taken away because of the coronavirus situation that we're all forced to deal with right now. So that's the story.
I actually had tickets to go to that game.
Is that right?
In Lambeau. One of my neighbors is a Notre Dame alumni, and he kind of talked me into going to that once in a lifetime type game and meeting at Lambeau. So I was, as a fan of college football, I had to jump all over that. So I was kind of disappointed that got hopefully it gets re-put back on when everything's calm down.
I hope so too, because like you said, that's the kind of game that should be played. Great backdrop, 2 historic teams, would have been a lot of fun. So that's the story in the Big Ten, the 2 big games of the week. Let's go to the Big 12 now. Bedlam, that rivalry renewed on Saturday. Oklahoma State, one point in time, kind of a college football playoff fringe contender. That, for the most part, came to an end once the Cowboys lost to Texas. Oklahoma, on the other side, starts the year as a playoff contender. Folks turned their back on the Sooners after they lost to Kansas State and struggled to beat Texas. But since then, you may have missed a lot. Oklahoma's kind of seemingly righted itself a bit as of late, winning comfortably the last few weeks and hosting the Cowboys on Saturday as 7-point favorites, one of the fun rivalries in college football each and every year. With that in mind, Sooners favored by 7. Mike Griffith, your thoughts on Bedlam?
Yeah, I like Oklahoma in this game to win and to cover. I'm going to make my score just so that they cover the spread, 38-30. I see which way it's trending. I like to go against the trend, so I'm going to take the school that was founded in 1890 and did not start playing football until 1895, the Oklahoma Sooners, to win 38-30.
So it is Oklahoma for Mike Griffith. Jeff Sintel, how about for you?
So it looks like both of these teams, one's going in different directions. Oklahoma State looks like they've been withering a little bit. It looks like Oklahoma is playing a lot better since the Texas game. If you look at what they did against Texas, common opponent theory, maybe would hedge towards Oklahoma. But what Oklahoma has done is it's played a lot better since then. Oklahoma has better players. Oklahoma has the 7-point favorite this week. I like Oklahoma to win this game. I like them to cover that 7.5 points.
Oklahoma for Jeff Sintel as well. Connor Riley, Sooners and the Cowboys. What do you think?
I like Oklahoma State here. They can play a little bit of defense there in Stillwater, and Oklahoma can't really run the ball, so I think that's going to keep the game close. I like Oklahoma State to cover the 7 here and potentially even outright win in Norman this weekend.
So Connor on the Cowboys there. I'm going to go Oklahoma. I should say also, let me give a shout out to the audience. 67% of the audience takes Oklahoma here, so 2-1. Dog Nation Daily audience favors the Sooners over the Cowboys. I'm going to go Oklahoma here. I don't have a strong take on this other than I think that Lincoln Riley is the kind of coach that wants to give his fans something in what otherwise may feel like a lost year. You know, Oklahoma does not have the feel of a playoff contender at the moment. So a rivalry win may be the next best thing that he can offer. I think that 7 points is not too much for Oklahoma at home. I don't think either of these teams are particularly very good, but I think that Oklahoma is probably better coached and so therefore capable of covering this number. I'll take the Sooners minus the 7. Flow then goes on Oklahoma too. Dar, you want to go with the flow and take Oklahoma?
You know, this also, gives Oklahoma a chance to play, for the Big 12 championship.
That's right.
Definitely a lot rides on this because they already know they're out of the playoffs. On paper, this is a rivalry game, but Oklahoma's won 18 of the last 19 times they played against each other. So is it really? The Sooners offense is finding their groove right now. Rattlers kind of got the stuff moving. Not much at the pace as Baker Mayfield or Kyler Murray or Jalen Hurts, but it's definitely trending in the right direction. However, their defense is giving up a lot of big plays. The Cowboys definitely have their fair share of opportunities to score. The line opened at Oklahoma minus 10. So a lot of money's come in on Oklahoma State here. I think at 7, it's good value for the Sooners. That's who I'm picking. I think they're going to cover, and who knows before kickoff, if it does dip down to 6.5, I think that is exceptional value to take the Sooners here. My stronger play on this game is actually the over, which is 59. I think there's going to be a lot of fireworks and a lot of scoring going back and forth in this game.
It's fun to be talking about these ranked games again, Dari. I feel like that we haven't been able to do much of that this year for obvious reasons, but to have 2 top 25 matchups and a top 10 matchup within the Big Ten and a fun bedlam rivalry here between Oklahoma and Oklahoma State, this season just hasn't provided us nearly enough big national games. This weekend, you really feel like you've got some of that. I'm glad to have that back in our college football lives once again.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's kind of the one thing that's been missing this season is not having a lot of ranked teams or really good teams. A lot of, there's been some close games and some other, just matchups, but of the heavyweights and of the a lot of ranked teams, we really haven't had too many. So it's definitely good to get some of these games. I think some of these are going to be really close and really fun.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to that. Let's turn our attention back to Georgia hosting Mississippi State before we're done. We gave you our thoughts on the point spread a bit earlier. The total, which we always like to make the pick on, is much smaller than you might have guessed at the beginning of the season for a game involving a Mike Leach team, but Leach has also been shut out in a game this year, held to just 2 points in another. Offense has, for the most part, been put in handcuffs by SEC defenses. And that leaves the total for this game at just 44 points. Obviously, if the betting public is expecting a quarterback change for Georgia. They're not necessarily expecting a big change in the overall offensive results, at least on the basis of this number here, with just 44 as the total. But that said, Mike Griffith, give us your thoughts on the two Bulldogs and the total of points that'll be scored.
Georgia might score that on their own. That number is just strikingly low to me. I know that there's been so many unders so far, but I was very conservative with my pick. I'm predicting a cold, windy night at 38-7, and I had the over. So I'm absolutely on the over. That's one of my favorite bets of the year, the over in this game.
Over for Mike Griffith. Jeff Sintel, what about you?
I got an over here. I mean, I think if this game goes conservatively in the way that I think it might go, you're still going to look at a 35-21 type game, well north of that over. Give me the over here, and rare over these days. It seems for those Georgia Bulldogs.
Over for Jeff Sintel as well. Now, Connor Riley.
I'll take the over here because I took Georgia minus 25, and I think to get there, they're going to have to score more than a combined 44 points.
Connor is over too. The Dog Nation Daily audience, though, they are on the under, 58%. So a little bit of a split decision there, but under prevails for the Dog Nation Daily audience. And Dari, I'm under on this game too. I typically like to couple unders with underdogs and a big number like this, favorites with overs. If I like Mississippi State plus the 25, I think that forces me to like the game underneath the 44. I don't expect Georgia to score 30, 40 points in this game necessarily. They may score more than they're used to, but it's not going to be a big total. And I do think that given the extra time to prepare, Georgia will have something for whatever Mike Leach may try to throw out here offensively. I just like the game to go under the 44. Flow on the side of the over, though. You want to go with the flow.
No, I can't do it. I'm going on the under. Georgia's offense is hard to watch. The unders cashed in 4 or 5 times the last 5 times these two teams have played against each other. I think the score is going to be Georgia in the high 20s or low 30s, and I think Mississippi State's going to get 10 to 14 points.
Yeah, so that's certainly a pretty cogent analysis of what to expect from that. It is a busy week of games coming up, and it was fun to talk about all of those with you here on Go with the Flow, presented by R.S. Andrews. Folks, don't forget to check out R.S. Andrews for all of your air conditioning, your heating, your plumbing, your electric needs. We head towards that winter season. Get that heating system tuned back up to factory fresh specs. And Dari, as we get ready to say goodbye here today and let folks actually watch some of these games we just talked about, the floor will be yours to kind of give us a cheers on the way out the door here.
Cheers. Go Dogs.
We'll see you next week on Go with the Flow, presented by R.S. Andrews.